Welcome to the Mulatto History Channel. The Mulatto History Channel is dedicated to sharing and exploring mulatto history around the world. So tune in and enjoy the history lessons that I share with you on this channel. The Mulatto History Channel is dedicated to sharing our history, our story, and our voice. I'm going to go through a little short presentation, kind of give you guys a background of this. So obviously the theme tonight is the Gold Coast Euro-Africans. So the whole concept of Euro-African, or as the gentleman Toenail Breaker likes to say, EuroAfric, was brought to me by this gentleman here. So Toenail Breaker in the house, appreciate you. Yeah, a lot of useful information. That's the whole reason why I decided to hop up on here, right? To start uploading content, making videos, and share information and learn, of course, is a lot of these interesting findings. And so this includes one of those interesting findings, right? So now I've been to Ghana, so I've been to the partially part of the Gold Coast. Yeah, I heard the word, one of the tour guides at the castle in Elmina, which was a Portuguese fort. One of the tour guides there mentioned mulattoes, the historical reference of mulatto people. But as we'll find out, there's been other terms, other names for people who are genetically and culturally mulatto people. So I'm gonna dive right into it real quick, and then I'm gonna drop the link, and then me and the other gentleman is gonna have a dialogue based on this. So essentially, what I showed you on the map, the Gold Coast, right? And here, Gold Coast is a former British colony in West Africa, known today as the Republic of Ghana, which I've been to, so I have firsthand knowledge on this. This isn't just conjecture or something I've read online. I've literally barefoot, feet in the sand, in the ground, talked to people in this land. So I do have reference for this. In the transatlantic slave trade era, Europeans identified the region as the Gold Coast because of the large supplies of and market for gold that existed. Yeah, even today it's kind of with the Asante Kingdom. I could share a picture of how gold is kind of emblematic for the Asante people. So Portuguese traders built the fort of Elmina in 1482, which, like I've stated, I've been there, so I have pictures and evidence of that. Within 10 years of their arrival on the coast, many other Europeans followed with forts and markets of their own, including Danish, Dutch, Swedes, and English. Eventually, the British rose to dominance and established the Gold Coast colony in the mid-19th century. In 1957, the Republic of Ghana became the first of Britain's African colonies to gain independence. And Kwame Nkrumah is a major figure and important individual for that as well. European commerce in the region began with a focus on gold. and other minerals, but which explorers found to be abundant there. As was the case in many other African regions, Europeans soon began to demand African captives in the trade to the coast. As the kingdoms of the region, especially the Asante, which, yeah, of course, the Asante began to expand and consolidate their power, a significant part of the regional commerce turned to supplying slaves instead of gold. So definitely you can see here the gold, etc. This is definitely symbolic and emblematic of their Asante Empire in the Kumasi region is where they have held their palace, etc. So yeah, gold is definitely very symbolic to them, and they're definitely rich in gold, other minerals as well, but gold is something that they are known for, and the kente cloth as well. I just wanted to share that with you guys for reference. Pertinent part of this discussion or this lecture, and then I'm going to get into the discussion with Toenail Breaker. I'm going to drop the link in a second, or a minute, I should say. So going into it, Gold Coast Euro-Africans, right? We're a historical demographic based in coastal European. I'm not going to read all of this, guys. I'm going to read some of it, the important parts, and then I'm going to leave the link in a description box so you guys can, examine it yourselves. Based in the coastal urban settlements of colonial Ghana that arose from unions between European and African women from the late 15th century, the decade between 1471 and 1482 until the mid 20th century, circa 1957, when Ghana attained its independence. In this period, different geographic areas of the Gold Coast were politically controlled at various times. We've already explained by the Portuguese, Germans, Swedes, Danes, Dutch, and British. In Ghana, in particular the Gold Coast, like Nigeria, etc., it was a British colony. There are also records of merchants and other European nationalities such as Spaniards, French, Italians, and Irish operating along the coast, in addition to American sailors and traders from New York, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. Euro-Africans were influential and in intellectual, technocratic, artisanal, commercial, and public life in general, actively participating in multiple fields of scholarly and civic importance. So right here, scholars have referred to this Euro-African population of the Gold Coast as, quote, Creoles, and, quote, mulattoes, and mulattofoi, and aluai. My pronunciation is not good with these terms, but what I wanted to indicate was the whole mulatto designation. How many of these people who are kind of coined or referred to in text, as you see, as Euro-Africans are also referred to as Creoles and mulattoes as well. The whole concept of even like with Creoles, there was a gentleman, I don't know if I should call him a gentleman, but he was some guy in my comment section like a month or two ago when I shared a video. And he basically was like, oh, this guy, he's not a mulatto, he's a Creole. I'm like, well, okay, that makes you feel better, the names, but essentially, if someone who's Creole means they have heavily admixture of European and other, but whatever. Among other descriptions, the term awula conveys contemporary notion of gentlemanliness, leaning, and urbanity, or a salaried big man in the Ghanaian language. The cross-cultural interactions between Europeans and Africans were mercantile-driven and an avenue to both social capital and economic and political gain, wealth, and power. The growth and development of Christianity during the colonial period also instituted motifs and modernity, vice Euro-African identity. The model created a spectrum of practices ranging from a full celebration of native African customs to a total embrace and acculturation of European culture. Of course, the genealogy obviously is specific. It's talking about in the Ghanaian region, and they have different ethnic groups in Ghana, the Fente, etc. In Accra, which is like the capital city, Cape Coast, Elmina. Okay. So of course I'm gonna drop this description. This is wiki, guys. I mean, there's a gentleman as well. I don't know if he showed up in the house tonight, but he basically was basically saying that, Wikipedia is not a good source, which I tend to agree. You definitely have to cross-check multiple sources, but for instance, when you're doing research and you're looking at different sources, and sometimes there's not a lot of options you have, so you kind of have to stick with the data you have, and then from there, build upon it. But this is what I got so far. If any of you guys want to share anything, please hit my email or, you know, Instagram, DM me or whatever. So education, literacy, I'm not going to even get into that. Or I mean, briefly, it says right here, the castle schools, which this is the story that they talk about when I went to Elmina. Let me start from the beginning, okay? Because I have firsthand knowledge of this. When I one of the tour guides, when I toured the Elmina Castle, basically this is their whole the premise was that there were mulatto people who were kind of bred there, then they were educated by European people to kind of, this is a conspiracy they push to kind of be kind of a overseer, kind of a buffer class over the black population there. So this is part of the history, and they definitely still continue to mention that. So Euro-Africans were noted for their literacy because they were definitely classically trained in European education. Specifically, this is Portuguese, Elmina, having benefited from European type formal education at the castle schools in Christianborg and Cape Coast. Both opened in the 17th century, as well as the Elmina castles, which opened in 1482. This is Portuguese, correct? This Western style education can be situated in coastal commerce and educational connections to Protestant missionaries from the Basel and Wesleyan societies that operated in the colonies' townships. The castle schools were started with the approval of European governors to baptize and primarily educate the male Euro-African mulatto children of European men and Gold Coast African women, to train them as administrative clerks and interpreters for colonial civil servants, as well as soldiers in the garrisons around coastal European fortresses. So that's definitely significant as far as the historical reference. You have to understand that a lot of the pro-wax, they use this right here. And this was, okay, black women and white men, okay? And these were unions that were kind of forced upon the people. This wasn't free will unions. But the pro-wax, they'll use this reference, this historical reference. This is 500 years ago, okay, 1482, so more than 500 years ago. They'll use this reference and they'll tie it into today. And they'll basically make the claim, well, I don't trust biracials, I don't trust mulattoes. There's a history of them, the white man using them against us. They're referring to this because they're reading Chancellor Williams' book, The Destruction of Black Civilization. So this is what they'll reference this, and they'll also reference Kemet. They'll reference ancient Egypt and how everyone was kings and queens, but the empire fell because the white man used the mulatto. So this is real heavy, deep shit. I mean, this is what the pro-wax pushed. But what I'm saying is they use this reference here and they connect it to today, when in today, these are not forced relationships. These unions aren't forced. The unions today in America, majority is black man, white woman. And these are two people who come together lovingly and willingly to create a family and to create children. But the pro-wax, they take this type of this history and they use conspiracy theories and put it on us today as we're a part of some grand conspiracy, to hold them down and all this stuff. So I just want to mention that how information can be distorted. People can use past references, history from the past, and they can use it today to fit their narrative and their agenda. Because a lot of it is the envy, right? The envy that they have for people like us, beautiful mulatto people. So they use this type of to cover up their envy and jealousy of us, and the fact they can't perform with a lot of us, that we're basically given these rights and privileges and status from white people. But that's a whole nother discussion. I just want to tie that into that because it's going to come up in the future as well, you guys. So let me continue on before I bring on my guest. Early generations of Africans went to Europe, for higher education. Okay, this is all stuff you guys can all look at. Participation in public discourse. The term emerging clergy and cassius class had educated, quote, mulattoes amongst its ranks. So the thing I wanted to point out as well with this wiki article is how it's labeled Gold Coast Euro-Africans, but the word mulatto is interchangeable with this, right? That's the whole point. That is connected. And obviously when you see, other situations, like it says Creole here. So mulatto is just definitely well known. It's the general term of how we identify people like myself and others of a similar kind of background. Um, but yeah, I wanted to point that out, and then also, yeah, this is basic literature. The gentleman social. Okay, I'm gonna get into this, and then I'm gonna drop the link. Social perceptions. Oral accounts indicate that coastal mulatto men. There we go again. It's just this is what it is. Okay, oral accounts indicate that coastal mulatto men had perceived reputation of maternal instability. Excuse me. Actually, I apologize, guys, if the text could have been a little too tiny for you guys. I think it's managed better now. Oral accounts indicate that coastal mulatto men had perceived a reputation of maternal martial instability and philandering, even though the native religions prohibited polygamy. A Basel missionary observed that Euro-African men were often, see how they interchange the words? Euro-African here, and this the first sentence, mulatto men, to lay the foundation. The second sentence, they get into, okay, another descriptor, Euro-African men, and it's the men is an important factor here, okay? Were often half bankrupt, lazy, and lustful. So this quotation is coming from hard drinking, gambling, and occasional outbursts of violent behavior from whatever reference works they have, um, which I can check in there. Quest for entertainment and merry making. Euro-African traders often partook in traditional festivals like, don't know what that is. It's a Ghanaian celebration. Okay, Harvest Festival of Ghanaian people in Accra, which had elements of drumming, dancing, and brandy drinking. Many Euro-Africans, through baptized and confirmed in a church, were normally Christian and led a robustly secular lifestyle, which was at odds with the lifestyle of pessimistic Basil and Victorian Wesleyan missionaries whose spiritual influence extended to the coast. Okay, like the trader counterparts, Euro-Africans in white-collar occupations often socialized with European residents on the coast, engaging in, okay, yeah, in that reference. And then I'm gonna, yeah, Jenkins Paul, 1998, The Recovery of the West African Past, African Pastors, African History, 19th Century. Okay, so the book, which was published about 24 years ago. Okay. So the picture on the, I'm going to share with you guys. Let me drop the link now. Prepare for the gentleman is still here. So nobody else touch this link. This link is going to be for Toenail Breaker. So I'm dropping a link. So Toenail Breaker, if you're still in the chat, hit the link, hop on up. So the thumbnail that I chose was a gentleman. Was a gentleman here, Christian. I hear Jacob Proughton. So I'm not going to talk about him right now, but this is the gentleman. I felt like the image was definitely, extremely useful and kind of, put a picture on things. Was a Euro-African, Moravian missionary, pioneer, linguist, translator, and educationalist administrator.
Evening. Thank you for the invite.
Oh, yeah, it's my pleasure. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. So I greatly appreciate you being here.
Awesome. Right quick, I just wanted to interject just before I was gathering notes while you were covering. You said something in regards to people saying wiki is unreliable, etc. Wiki is like similar to like you and I, that where it's a multitude, multiple people whom from different backgrounds, different places, different perceptions that gather sources of information and then contribute them into wiki based on their factual findings. And those factual findings can either be contested by somebody else, by someone else with other sources to debunk other proofs that are introduced. So wiki, after a period of time, it evolves on whatever topic it is that many volunteers are basically participating in to add to the articles. I just want to get a clarification from that. So when you hear sources coming from wiki, it's pretty much a general procession of people who have put input into the wiki subject to come out with the information that like what you're getting right now at the moment. But anyhow, continue. I apologize.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I completely agree with you. That's kind of my whole thought process on it as well. It's just basically an encyclopedia. People can add information, and then the information can be contested if it's false. Um, yeah,
Correct.
I mean, yeah. And the thing is that's great about Wiki is it leads you to other resources. Like it has the references pinned. from the books and the texts and the articles. So you can just always cross check your references as well.
Yep, 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 exactly.
Definitely. So I think it's a definitely notable source. Now I remember one of your initial comments when I dropped my name designation video, is you talked about dropping the suffix the an, so it's distinguishing that it's EuroAfric instead of EuroAfrican, meaning
Yeah,
you're not right.
yeah,
How would
yeah, yeah, correct. Because we are not Africans. We weren't born in Africa. We don't carry African culture. If primarily what we carry is American culture, whatever version of it or the subcategories of the culture within America. But we're not African because we don't belong to any particular ethnic group or tribe. We don't even speak the language. I mean, like say for instance, my dad is 98% West Central African. And one of the things that growing up, he told me, he says he doesn't know anything about Nigeria. He doesn't speak Nigerian. He has nothing. He says he's a West Indian Caribbean man. That's what he is because that's his culture. That's his culture. That's where he was born, etc. So he never attributed or referred to himself as an African or to be a Nigerian or anything of the such. So in that particular perspective, so we have to be careful about what these words symbolize and what they mean.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, and I really appreciate the whole your whole frame of reference of how the whole important part is to label ourselves and not have other people label us. I definitely agree with that.
Correct.
Definitely.
Correct.
The thing is, though, like I pointed out in the article, when you look at the designation of Euro-Africans, it's interchangeable with the word mulatto and also Creole as well. Because there was a gentleman I already mentioned earlier where in one of my videos, he basically was telling me, "Oh, this man, he's not a mulatto, he's a Creole," as if it's like you look at him, because mulatto people throughout history, like you can say in Spain, right, with the Moors and the Berbers and how they kind of interbred with the Europeans there in the Iberian Peninsula, phenotypically presenting a mulatto, there's definitely kind of a phenotypical presentation. Would you agree? Even if it was so-called, European and like Arabic blood, etc.
That's a strong word, phenotypically, because the reason why I say that, even if you were to say Creoles, whatever, to its modern day of what it meant and what it meant back then, and mulattoes, etc. There is technically there isn't a unique phenotype for these individuals because for this classification of group. The reason why I say this is because this classification of the group can pass to be other races of people. It could be passed for Middle Easterners. It could be passed for somebody over in Persia that probably mixed with somebody from India. This kind of this type of this type of amalgam mixture of from people from different not from different continents but from different countries, etc., can come up with a variety of different types of phenotype that could be mistaken for people like us, or we could be mistaken for them. So it's not really concrete. If you've been around the world and have and associated with a lot of people around the world, you could see how we can pass for a lot of people. And when the concept comes up, or this mixed race person looks black, but then when you go ask an African, no, they don't look black, they look mixed race, or they look Arab or something of the such, then you see where I'm coming from in regards to that.
Oh yes, 100%, most definitely. It's funny you mentioned that. I want to tell a quick story because yeah, a lot of people kind of in California where I'm from, Southern California, people would think I'm like Puerto Rican or something, right? That's kind of what they would say first. People would walk up to me and speak Spanish, but I've had a couple occasions. One gentleman when I was in high school, he was from Ethiopia. And I was trying to tell him, this is when I was obviously a teenager. I was telling him, no, I'm black. I'm like you. Because this was like the first African that I met, an authentic African, front to front, face to face, that barely spoke English. He was from Ethiopia. And I was telling him, oh, I'm black, kind of like you, right? And he was like, no, you're Mexican, He told me I was a Mexican. And I remember like several years later, a Nigerian gentleman from Nigeria, he was telling me that I look like a Mexican or Puerto Rican or something. So what you're saying is true. Um, it's
Yeah,
pretty
it
funny.
just it all depends on how for me, how I'm dressed. If I'm out with my wife in public, then they will probably think I am an Arab. But if I'm just out in just regular dress going to work, etc., they would have no idea. They would probably think I'm either Spanish. They would probably think, oh yeah, you got something going on there with you. And people will say, yeah, you have something going on, but it will be confusing because the way how I, because of character and presentation, will completely toss people all over the place trying to figure out what I am.
Definitely. So, I mean, basically, you're saying people kind of oftentimes refer to you as being someone like of Spanish descent, is what you're saying. You kind of get.
Yeah, if I'm in Spanish populated areas, I would people will come up to me and start speaking Spanish. They would think automatically that I'm Spanish.
For sure, for sure. And then you also mentioned the type of clothes you wear. So,
Yeah,
because I
yeah.
know you said you're from the kind of hip hop breakdancing era, so we wearing like baggy clothes. People think you're blacker or something like that.
Well, back in that time when I came to the United States, back in the 1980s, right? And I was influenced a lot by hip hop, so I would more adopt the hip hop northern style. Remember now, there in America back in that time, the culture was not overall one slap the same. There was a difference between North and South and East Coast and West Coast culturally, right? And also to culturally based on the way how you dressed, the way you talked, the way how you would present yourself, etc. But for me, my influence came from more from people from Jersey and New York and Philly and so on, because I spoke because those are a lot of the people back home in the Caribbean that went back and forth from the Caribbean. They went up to those parts and brought that culture concept, back home to the Caribbean. Not just that, you had movies like Breakin', a Break In and Break Into, and Prince. Prince had a couple of movies like Purple Rain, etc., that represented that more that 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 mixed race, black and white, Puerto Rican, and everything all into one. But the one that I was more attracted to the most was definitely hip hop back in that scene. So yeah, I used to dress in my baggy pants, baggy shirt. I used to have a high top fade, but I had to use hairspray to keep it up. I definitely had to use a ton of hairspray to keep it up because it would flop if I didn't use hairspray, and stuff like that. And then which was a couple of things that influenced me to come to the United States. And I wanted to come to the United States because I got tired of wearing the uniforms and all of that stuff back home. So I wanted to come here and wear normal clothes, regular clothes, going to school, etc. So but I came here, and I think it just lasted, and it was completely a culture shock because it did not turn out the way how I perceived it to be or that I wanted it to be. And things got a bit shaky from there, and had a bit of a cultural change after that time. Only to just about after 2 years being here.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, you mentioned that just kind of the kind of hostilities that were present. It's interesting because for me, I started to see a lot of the hostilities like kind of recently, like within the past like 5 or 6 years, so to speak. Prior to that, I did not feel like a lot of stigma or gatekeeping in the circles that I was around. I felt like there was a lot of kind of general acceptance and welcoming, depending on the area as well, the environment. But obviously it's regionally, it probably plays a part too because you're on the East Coast, I'm over on the West Coast. But yeah, yeah, and you said that you used to wear, like, I guess where you're from, you guys had school uniforms and stuff, but the media, the pictures you saw with Prince, and I'm guessing the other gentleman who was kind of friends with Prince in Purple Rain, I forgot that cat's name. The Time, I think his name was like
I
Morris
forgot.
Day.
Yeah, I
Morris
forgot.
Day.
Yeah, I forgot most of the names inside it. But like Prince and all the people that played with Prince in those films coming up, and then you had Turbo, you had from Breaking and Breaking Two, those movies, and Fat Boys, etc. Like I was totally was into because what they represented was this multicultural mix. Because whenever you're looking at, and when you go back and you look at their films, what do you see? You see black, white, you see Spanish, all mixed, and that's the type of environment that I want. I want it to be around this type of a diverse environment because it represented me in some sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. No, I agree. I agree. It's very interesting. Yeah, and like you said, culturally, so you're obviously astute and well aware of that, and just the regional difference of the culture, and even within hip hop, the expression of it from the South, from the East Coast, and then where I'm from, Southern California, it was like heavy, like gangster shit, right?
Yeah, I could tell the difference from it, being here for the 2 years, I was able to tell a northerner from a southerner, from a person who was, a northerner, because hip hop was more, technically speaking, the real hip hoppers, you would say, is from north, from Philly, from up north, or the northerners. And northerners and southerners didn't really get along that well, among blacks. They did not get along. They did not get along at all. If you were from up north, you were going to be throwing hands back then. So, but today it's changed though. A lot of that has changed, where it's become more assimilated in acceptance. There's no division between north and south, east coast and west coast. It doesn't seem, from after the period, after 30 plus years, I haven't seen so much of a difference, because it seems like it has merged into one at this particular time, because due to technology and media now.
Yeah, most definitely too. Like I agree with you. Yeah, there I don't really see that regional kind of bi-coastal division like it was like when the 90s era. But you know what's interesting is I've always kind of known too that like with the southern rappers, like there wasn't, I mean, I'm going to say that there wasn't the same level of like eloquence like with like the East Coast rappers. Like you have guys like KRS-One and Nas and some of these other rappers who are kind of can express themselves in, a variety of different ways versus some of the rap down south was very kind of simple and basic. I know I might get some hate for saying that, but
I'll say it. The rap music in the South was just the degradable of the degradable. Rap music in the North was more about wisdom and logic. It was more uplifting and it was positive, but the negative sold more than the positive. So that's what you have now.
oh yeah, what you have now is definitely conspicuous consumption, buying stuff in cars you don't need and like the gold teeth, the tattoos on the face. I listen to some of the newer trap stuff as well, especially if I'm working out, but it's crazy how it's kind of, been downgraded heavily, just commercialized. Yeah, and the drug use is it's promoted heavily. But yeah, so I guess turning it around to the kind of the core central theme of the discussion. Now there's one another thing I kind of wanted to share with you that you're here. Um, so in one of my videos, I think it was like a couple of weeks ago, yeah, on the 10th, I did a video basically a mulatto identity, and you shared a comment. But what was interesting is the gentleman, this guy here, Mulatto Sensei, who kind of I guess challenged your comment, so to speak, but I wanted to go into your thoughts on it basically in more depth, because I do agree with what both you guys are saying here as well. But reading from Mulatto Sensei, he says, I guess I can just start with your initial comment here. If you would like to read, or I can read it,
No,
it
go
does.
for it.
Cool. Miss Mulatto was lying out her teeth. Oh, true indeed. Yeah. And she's one of those Southern rappers we talk about who could barely express herself.
Mhm.
Country bumpkin, it is what it is. Her deflection is clear. She was trying to protect her influencers who gaslit her on the term and she bought into it. Yes. She is simply trying to appease her black followers. True indeed. I'm not for reviving an archaic term, though. Definitely, that's your stance. But I 100% agree for us to be clearly distinguished as our own racial group in which the RIA, I don't think I remember the reference of that.
Racial Integrity Act.
Definitely, definitely violated it, was never restored after it was struck down by the USSC, is that United States Supreme Court.
Correct.
The extreme hardest part and near impossible is to move the USCB, this is at a code system, to refuse this term, or United States Census Bureau. Yeah,
Yes, correct.
they are thinking on the majority of the authority sources. You would first have to convince the Royal Spanish Academy that they are wrong, and no one here is a Spanish scholar or scholar of the Spanish history and culture to contest an academy in its ruling in which the United States Census Bureau is going to reference for authority, since the term is a Spanish word, not an Anglo word. Having the United States Census Bureau to restore a racial group of people whom have a black parent and white parent is without doubt sound. Just needs some dedicated work. Yes, historical references should be preserved to show black and white mixed race people do in fact have a history in America, but the mulatto, which until the early 1900s got amalgamated into black history because of the Racial Integrity Act. The thing is, though, from my understanding, I think we mentioned this before, a lot of people kind of mistakenly think that the mulatto people is a mulatto is basically one person with a black parent, a white parent. That's generally how it's referenced, but in my understanding, what they people want to throw around this term called MGM, or multi-generationally mixed, but it's a very brand new term. It's only used online. My understanding, if I see someone who is a mulatto person, okay, for all intents and purposes, mating and having a child with a mulatto person, so like Steph Curry, Aisha Curry, their children are mulattoes. That's my understanding.
Without
Um,
an absolute doubt, Steph Curry back in before the Racial Integrity Act will be regarded as a mulatto.
and his
Um,
parents are
yeah, and
both
his
mulatto.
parents. Yeah, even MGMs today, people who call themselves MGMs today will be regarded as a mulatto
That's my
based
thought
on
process.
it's and a lot of this was expressed in some of in a lot of references made to Frederick Douglass, and also to some of Frederick Douglass's writings, where he is called straight up a mulatto in the time when obviously he got into trouble or something like that. They refer to him as a mulatto. In the census, the U.S. Census for Frederick Douglass, which I sent you the link for in the archive, he was
Right.
also too basically in the census designated as MU, not black.
Right, right, right. Yeah, and you know what? I was gonna ask you about that as well because I was checking the link. They had W. Du Bois as well, but damn, it was so hard to read the cursive writing in that. But I was definitely gonna get back to you on that as well. But thank you for pointing that out since we're
Hmm.
here. Yeah, this picture definitely signifies that because, of course, Steph Curry, his parents right here, they are both what we'd call mulattoes, right? And then, of course, his wife, him and Steph Curry. So this tradition, but yeah, I just wanted to mention that. Going back to the we have Mulatto Sensei in the house.
Cool.
Okay. I've never really heard him speak or anything. He's definitely commented a lot. But yeah, I would like to, because he's definitely contributed to some of the discussion. So I wanted to go back to the comment. He's in the house, so that's pretty fitting. Um, so yeah, you made that comment and then he responded to that. I thought it was pretty interesting. I didn't even jump in to like interject. I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts. You guys kind of, I guess, hash it out, so to speak. But it's funny that now you're both here, so we can yeah, so I responded, thank you. I thought, yeah, you definitely laid it out there. Then Mulatto Sensei, who's in the chat, responded, basically stating, according to your logic with archaic term, what about white? It has been around the same time. Black and Negro was interchangeable, right? Because Negro is negro in Spanish, correct? That's just a Spanish term, just like mulatto
Hmm.
Spanish,
Hmm.
used at the same time, and all those classifications are still used, but he calls it black technocrats elites now. I don't know about that though. I mean, there might be a few of them there, but um, changed and demonized the term so mulattoes can only identify with black only. Now that's the true thing is that the only people I find that don't really like the word. I'm not saying you, for instance, Tonal Breaker, but when I get people in my comment section or whatever who say I don't like that word's bad, they're typically black people. And my whole thought process is because they don't want us to kind of identify independently from them. So continuing on in the one drop rule, moreover, this was done to claim the accomplishments of mulattoes and quadroons and increase the black population, right? Which is more money in their political districts. Okay. Race is all about money in America. There was a video that was shared recently. It was like a TikTok video. I forgot whose channel it was. Um, But he was basically saying this. A lot of these people, these are black people, monoracial, they will say black and brown, and they're doing that to have like galvanize more political influence in a society. So they'll include the quote brown category when it's convenient. That's for power and influence.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
They didn't care about the psychological damage and confusion it causes and creates colorism with blacks, despising mixed race peoples who call themselves blacks. Exactly.
Hmm.
The term is
Hmm.
still used in Latin America. Okay. And then
Hmm.
you responded to that, but go ahead, please.
No, so yes, I agreed with him. Now you have to understand now what Mulatto Sensei and myself, you have to look at us as stone sharpening stone. What we're doing is we're exercising our source of information, and I believe he has a similar background from me because it seems that for some, I believe it was him somewhere down in that conversation, he exerted that he had some influences, or he was even from the Caribbean himself, because he said we or something in that. So in this particular basis, him and I was pretty much starting off on the same footing. If he has a Caribbean background, I was born and raised in the Caribbean, which basically puts us at an advantage because we have not been institutionalized within the United States. We're not associated with any culture that has been institutionalized that is associated with the United States. So being that we are born outside of the United States, born and raised, we have zero fluence. So race is not being stuffed down our throat. So we're able to basically to see race in a completely more genuine aspect, like how we would probably look at chickens or maybe goats or maybe horses, like a brown horse, black horse, white horse, etc. And when they have a kids, it's still a horse, but you don't call it a black horse or a white horse. You call it either a black and white horse or a brown horse or something like that. But anyhow, I don't want to deviate too far from what was being read. So when the comparison being used with white and mulatto, I objected to because mulatto was not designated, never at any time designated as an ethnic group. It was designated as a racial class. Whiteness was designated first as an ethnic cultural group within the United States, which eventually evolved after a period of time to now include, which I call adopted whites, which is basically Irish, Irish, Greeks, and Italians, and so on and so on. Because whiteness originally only applied to an ethnic group, which was called Anglo-Saxon, specifically and only. Anyone else other than that, you were not considered white. So that was the only thing that I had using the comparison with them, because although the terminologies are almost identical, mulatto was actually before white. White didn't come along until probably in the 1600s or something, where it was coined, but not as a racial group, but as a culture, ethnic and cultural group. Whereas mulatto, which is going all the way back, it depends on how far you want to go back, 700 years, because we're to the original use of the words, which went to muladi and mawalad back when the North African Muslims, which included sub-Saharan Africans, Moors, etc., when they ransacked and invaded and colonized the Iberian Peninsula, and they started, they had special designated categories for individuals that were mixed between Africans and Europeans back at that time, which eventually evolved and became mulatto, which we have come to adopt today. So mulatto has a longer history than white. White is something practically new. And I'm very familiar with it because my mother is Anglo-Saxon and from the side, and they were very extremely religious people that interpreted race based on biblical influence. So, which found its way into pseudoscience as well. So this is the only part where I had to step forth, and I kind of disagreed, but on a technical level with him. And then I went through the breakdown with him to explain the difference between it. It's like trying to compare white, Igbo, Malay, Habesha, Gujarat, and Han people, etc. Mulatto, it's not like that. Mulatto is not like that, like these, which has a specific culture, which has a specific, like those other groups that I've mentioned. So yeah, those other groups that have is a specific ethnicity and culture. Mulatto does not have a specific ethnicity and culture, because as we have agreed, that mulatto is something that is not just between a person of a black parent and white parent. The usage of it has a very wide usage, especially back in that time, to mean anyone who has that phenotype look, or anyone that could be of MGM, or those who were born of mulattoes and generations after that. Yeah, so I just wanted to just get on that part without actually, I'm not exactly reading all the words there, but our viewers can see what actually I wrote, and that was my justification in what he stated.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I just wanted to share that and highlight it. Obviously, since you're here to kind of articulate it as well, but I thought it was pretty fascinating as well, especially how you used reference for in like Latin America, how Brazil and Cuba, how Dominican Republic stopped using the term, or they changed it to mixed race instead of mulatto. But then the gentleman, we can go on to, Mulatto Sensei basically saying that the term is still colloquially used amongst many natives there. And of course, he's from the Caribbean. I believe he's from Jamaica.
Hmm.
Mulatto Sensei. I've never had a conversation or dialogue with him, but just within the comment section. And then he states that almost every island in the Caribbean know the term and still use it. And even Mexicans know the term, just like mestizo. But then he says Puerto Rican doesn't use it as they are U.S. territory, so and heavily influenced by American racial rules. So I thought that was a very good, accurate point that he made there as well. That definitely.
And my objection to that would be, in the sense is, I would agree with that, but the Dominican Republic is not part of the United States, and they stopped using it.
Are they though? Are they part of the United States?
No, they're not part of the Dominican Republic. Is not part of the United States.
Okay, but they don't. Yeah, they don't use it. You're
They
saying, but
don't they don't use it. And the thing about it is, the Dominican Republic and Puerto Ricans both traced their ancestry, ethnically wise, or no, racially wise, to Taino Indians.
Mhm.
In the sense is to see how they're not really that far apart from each other. They're pretty much racially the same. It's just, they're almost racially the same, but they're culturally different. But at the same token, although that Puerto Rico became part of the U.S. territory, trust me, Puerto Ricans are not so welcoming of American philosophy on race, especially African American influences. They're very rejectful, very anti African American influences when it comes to race.
Right.
A matter of fact, just about all Caribbean people, most Caribbean people who were born and raised, that don't gravitate towards the African American cultural perception of things. So, but then you also to have to think, you can't really look at that. I agree with him if there was no other similar island like Puerto Rico, but you have the Dominican Republic, similar to Puerto Rico, that moved away from using that word.
Yeah, definitely. And like what you said is extremely true. Like a lot of I see it on TikTok and even on social media, a lot of the Dominican people are combating, the Black Americans kind of racial, theories as far as the one drop rule, because Black people swear up and down that, all these Dominican Republicans are Black because they got, mixed ancestry. And a lot of these people, you'll find them on TikTok and other places where they're combating that, which is I'm really good, proud of them for doing that because definitely a lot of black people in America want to one drop the whole entire planet, to kind of
Yeah, yeah,
fit
correct.
their agenda, so to speak. But yeah, okay, yeah. So I thought this convo that you guys were having was extremely intriguing. And like I said, I can't pick a side. I kind of agree with both of you guys. You guys both make excellent points.
I think that was the point of me entertaining the subject and pushing. I'm sure he was doing the same thing. As how we were thinking, from the different perspectives based on different experiences. Well, we had same background, probably from two different islands, But but uh, but we're both from the Caribbean, so uh, we have a foundation that we started from. So, but it's good that two Caribbean people were able, as again, sharpening stone here, to be able to exercise our different views and put them together to come up with final results in regards to them. And that's how things should be in general, technically speaking.
Yeah, most definitely. And I definitely promote that type of discourse, on my channel and my page. That's the whole purpose of this is I want to bring people, that are smarter than me, that have more experience than me, to share this information. I'm definitely appreciative of everybody who kind of navigates to the channel and puts comments and, he joins the panels, etc., who's able to share this information because I myself am being educated as well. Not only do I have the pleasure of kind of educating other people or advocating for us and our own unique, designation as well, but I'm here to learn as well. So it's definitely a pleasure. Um, yeah, and I really appreciate you hopping up on the panel today. I kind of definitely wanted to talk about that. And then basically what I already mentioned as far as the EuroAfric name designation, I definitely kind of encourage you to continue to educate people on that because I've never heard about it until you've coined it and reference it. And I first heard you reference it on J4 Conversations channel. I think we had a discussion like several months ago, probably 3 or 4 months ago, before I even uploaded any videos. I was just kind of listening to other people, and you
Yeah,
mentioned it. Yeah.
as you were reading, it's interchangeable with the word mulatto. The
Hmm.
the difference between it, one references the other, one references the other. One of the things that drew most of my attention towards that terminology is through anthropology. When you study anthropology and the anthropologists from the coming up in the 1700s, etc., and then coming up and they're speaking about mixed race history, and our successes and how we were able, because of European influences, primarily because we were given a lot, we obtained a lot more advantages over our African ancestors or counterparts in that particular sense.
Right. Right.
So, it's just plain old out, flat and simple. Where credit goes is just the European had a much, much, much more advanced culture, and that's sorry about that's my cat in the background. If you heard her, so it just had a much, much more advanced culture. And the advanced culture is going to dominate. It's always going to be better in some particular sense. Um, that's going to offer something better. But also to that advanced culture, how that culture became advanced, when you go back and you study the history of it, it also to observe and assimilate it from other cultures it adopted from, that it dominated.
Right. Right. Yeah, for sure. Like Anglo-Saxon culture has been heavily like influenced and by the even though there's a lot of pushback from the kind of Roman culture, right? I mean, the whole concept of a Puritan was to
Yeah,
pure.
yeah. The whole American political system, etc., is based off of Roman system.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, the
And
architecture, the laws, etc.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, everything is highly dependent on the Rome having a two-party, having a two-party government, etc., versus from one, versus for a single, in contrast to only having a single party government. um I mean, there's advantages, there's pros and cons between both of them. But anyhow, going back to the terminology of mulatto and EuroAfric, I just became more comfortable with the terminology of EuroAfric because when speaking with Europeans or anyone of European descent, they clearly understand what I'm talking about. When I say yes, well, I'm EuroAfric descent, or I identify as EuroAfric, they clearly know what that is. They know what it is. But for some reason, when I tell somebody, Africans know what it is. Caribbean people understand what that is. But when it comes to the African American mentality, what's that word? I never heard that word before. It's because you think because you never heard that word before, it doesn't exist. So so it was kind of like the kind of struggles that any mixed race person will probably go through. When you identify the self, they don't allow you to do that. What they do is they want to basically put you in this corner with them.
Right. Right.
And if you do that, you're actually going to be self-destructing your own self, because then later on you're going to wonder why people like us get chosen over you, but then you want to still classify us to being the same as you.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing, and I definitely see what you mean. The psychology behind that. Yeah, we definitely play into that game. I try not to, being new to a lot of this stuff. I definitely try not to fall into that. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned as well that, so when you mention EuroAfric, an African knows exactly what you mean. Could you explain that a little bit, like just briefly, an interaction you possibly had?
Well, if he hears the word Euro and then Afric
Hmm.
rather than African, this is one of my influences that I came up as speaking with Africans. Africans, when you're born and raised in Africa, when you're African, you have an African passport. You're born and raised in Africa. So one of the things that I've learned from Africans, that they can take offense when you claim the an or claim anything African on it, when you were never born and raised and you don't belong to any ethnic group, or you don't speak any type of African language, and you don't speak any type of African. They can take offense to it, but like, it's kind of silly for you to do that. You're more American because that's where you were born and raised, and that's the culture you've assimilated to. But when I have mentioned it before, they understood, just like anybody who is European, they understood exactly what the word was. I just didn't use the word mulatto because there's a lot of, as I said, it's some people have never heard of the word before. I've spoken to Puerto Ricans before, and they've never I I've spoken to Puerto Ricans, not older Puerto Rican, but newer but they're like not Gen X, millennials, I guess.
Yeah, my yeah,
Yeah,
my age.
millennials, I guess. They've never heard of the terminology from them. So then I have to kick back to another term for them. Okay, so you're Afric. So when the person is Spanish, and I said, okay, let me use a Spanish terminology. I've never heard that word, and then I have to go. I said, like, mestizo. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. I've heard that word before. So it's like mestizo, like, yeah, say EuroAfric. So yeah, so I'm more of you. But see, mestizo doesn't give the clear picture. But when I say EuroAfric or EuroAfric, then they understand you're of European descent, of African descent, and they understand that completely. It's very extremely a clear term, even if you've never heard the terminology before. But it's clear what you're trying to say, or how you're expressing yourself.
Most definitely. Yeah, I mean, I understand it when you mentioned it, you reference it. I knew exactly what you were referring to. It's just, yeah, I haven't heard the term before. But yeah, like I mean, just like I said, my own personal account, not to challenge anything you're saying, but a few years ago when I was in Portland, Oregon, Caucasian woman, she was, I guess, an Xer. She's a little older than me, and she looked at me, was like, "You're a mulatto, right?" I was like, yeah," because I was already acquainted with the word just from research and reading, but I've never really been called a mulatto like that, like to my face. And this is an American, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Anglo-Saxon from Portland, Oregon, basically referred to me as a mulatto, which I thought was interesting. This was a few years back. And just,
It's
yeah, just references from other people, like Filipino American people here in America, because obviously, like you said, it's a Spanish term. And then I already mentioned earlier in the broadcast how when I was in Elmina Castle, and the gentleman, the Ghanaian gentleman who was the kind of host, or the yeah, the host there, of the tour guide, was basically mentioning how mulatto people played a part in the castle there. So I just kind of wanted to reference that around the world, that I've definitely heard that word referenced in my presence. So it's interesting, but I like the fact that you're sharing that information as far as EuroAfric. I think it's important for people to know the different kind of name designations and labels, because I've, even me promoting the whole mulatto designation, I've had people who are, quote, mulattoes, who don't like the word, right? And my whole thing is, I'm not trying to offend people. It's just to kind of have a label where it's easy to distinguish. People know what I'm talking about. This isn't like, MGM or golden or these other kind of words where it can mean anything. I just like to be specific with how I'm identifying things, kind of like in your case as well. So, but I definitely appreciate what you have to offer and share.
Maybe we should adopt the Anglo-Saxon concept of coining racial groups. Since they want to add color and it's from biblical, we should call ourselves silver people. How about that?
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's like, yeah, brown or beige or fair skin. When I was in Ghana, when I went to one of the schools there, the children were like, "Oh, you're fair skin," and all that. It's funny, and they refer to some of us as yellow. I think you said you were called a yellow or a red man. I think you said in your
I
country, right?
I have, yeah, back home in the Caribbean, in the USVI, and throughout the majority of all the black population. If I'm in if I'm around a Spanish community like in Puerto Rico or Dominican Republic, I blend right in with everybody. So there's no question on there. It's when I start to talk and I don't know Spanish, then they start, "Wait, where are you from?" But yeah, back home I was always referred as the red people. As a red people, which is a euphemism, is referring to basically someone who is mixed race, or someone who is, again, going referring to mulatto, but they don't use that. They don't use that terminology back in the Dane the well, the Danish, British. I can't say all British islands, but some of those islands that have been back and forth. Some they used to belong to the British or the Spanish, then the Danes came in and took them out. A lot of terminologies changed and switched over a period of time for racial group, but black has always been the same. And not even black is not really so much used because it's used as an identity of skin color, and not rather that are not so much of a race. Because you could take in the Caribbean, you also to have Asians that have black skin, but have nothing to do with Africa. They have nothing to do with Africa just as much as a European doesn't have anything to do with Africa after a period of time, from what I'm referencing. So it's so for me, everyone knew there was something that was going on with me. I used to hear Rastafarians up underneath the trees, the elders. We used to refer to the elder people. They used to be up under the trees, etc. They said, "Boy, you can't see that. Look at that red boy over there. His mother a white woman. Oh, I already know something was up with he. I already could tell he got white shining all over him." That's how they used to tag me going
That's
around.
that's crazy. Yeah. Yeah, it sounds funny. I mean, the accent is the accent's pretty funny, but I can
Yeah,
definitely picture it. Yeah, a
yeah,
lot of them
yeah, and
sound like that.
and
Yeah.
and this is me, this little red boy running around with reddish, dirty blonde hair. Because back at that time, my hair was more like had this. It You could tell there was something that was going on, man. It's no way in the world. This was a fully black kid. I was walking around with reddish hair that was just with blonde tips, and it just said, "Yeah, this something is wrong with this." And my eyebrows are like light brown at that particular time. So they knew something was going on with me. But yeah, they was always referred to me the red boy or the red man or something like that. And then we were clustered in with all the rest of the other people that were mixed race on the island as well too, as being red people.
Interesting. Yeah, and and how in America the term red bone, you've heard that, right? This is reference to like a brown or lighter brown African American person. So it's yeah, and yellow bone,
Yeah, I
right?
was called that when I came here to the country. A lot of Southern blacks used to call me that, but they
Yeah.
used to call, yeah, they used to call me that. Uh, um, uh, that red bone, you red bones think you're all that. Everything when it came up to try to insult me or whatever it is, they would bring up the red bone thing. They went to the part of this. They went to the furthest reach of distinguishing me from them in order to exert the aggression or anything, something that they didn't like, etc. So whenever it came down to the nitty gritty and the final end, yes, that's when the true colors actually showed up.
Wow, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because like I'm from Southern California, so Los Angeles area, but I've heard the term red bone and stuff thrown yellow bone thrown out, but to me it was always kind of used in reference to women, to ladies. When I've heard the men say it, I don't, because if they refer to like a guy like me, I've never been called high yellow. I think maybe once, but they would say high yellow for a dude, um, or just oh that light skinned guy. But yeah, it's interesting the kind of colloquialisms and different terminologies we have to
Yeah,
reference color, right? Yeah.
yeah, back in the 1980s, yeah, I was referred to many, even coming here as referring to, I was referred to as a red person, but with the bone after it, with the bone after it, red bone. I just read, I'm just used to just red, a red thing. So I mean, if I had to put a color on a racial group, I would say red, because you know why? Our we do have a red complexion skin. A lot of us, our skins, our skin tone, our skin is we have transitional skin tone color. We could get
Hmm.
really light and then really, really dark, but in between of that mixture, a little side. One of the things that stands out is basically our ruddy red complexion, especially after coming out of the sun. It's sort of interesting for to have people try to guess, or people can't affiliate, they can't associate you or don't know where you're from based on your phenotype. And that's one of the things that I had experience with going experiencing towards people from Asia, people from the Middle East, etc. Is just it's hard to try to categorize to where to put you, and you become a I guess you would call like one of those up in the airs that we don't know.
And up in the air, you mean like an other, I guess?
Yeah, yeah, just up in the air. They just can't figure it. They just can't figure you out. Can't place a category to put you in,
Yeah.
which is sometimes the way how I like it.
Yeah, yeah, there's a level of kind of mysteriousness to that. Yeah, it's happened to me a lot in Southern California, which people would typically believe it's pretty much diverse. I think Spanish speaking people, specifically south of the border, kind of make up the main like demographic. But there's a lot of Asian people. There's a lot of East Indian or excuse me, South Indians, um, and yeah, or yeah, East Indians, yeah, South Asians, excuse me, South Asians, East Indians. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I typically get referred to as like Puerto Rican and stuff like that, or Brazilian.
Yeah,
But like,
which I could definitely see. I would, if you were walking on the street, then where I stay, which is a high level of put it this way, Brazilians, Puerto Ricans, a lot of people from the Caribbean. Is I'm not going to mention where I am on on here, but
oh yeah, please
um,
don't. Yeah,
yeah.
I don't either.
So
YouTube is pretty bad.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I am in a pretty much area which is highly Hispanic. Put it that way.
Hmm. Hmm.
From people from Brazil, people from Dominican Republic, people from Puerto Rico, people from Venezuela, Colombia. I'm around a lot of these people, a lot of people, and everyone think, and I blend right in with them. They think I'm probably from back then. What gives me away is when I start to talk.
Mm,
When I start to talk, they know that I'm Anglo.
right.
I've even had one guy when they find my name, you know what my name is, and you can see that is a purely European name. When they see that name, I've had one guy come back, and I started to laugh because it was my first time. He asked, "Well, so what part of Europe you're from?"
Oh
he,
wow.
he said, "What part of Europe you from?" The first thing that told me about this guy is, "I know you're not from the United States. You're from another country."
Mm,
When he asked me, because I knew he wasn't from it, and I was correct. He wasn't from here. So he didn't get involved. He wasn't wrapped up into the institutionalized racism, etc. He
hmm.
went by my characteristics, my presentation, and he went by what my name was. He knew that name was European, and that is a strictly European name. And he automatically said, "What part of Europe you're from?" And I looked at him and I laughed. I said, "I'm from the Caribbean, man." He was like, "Oh, really?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah." And we had an interesting conversation after that. But yeah, it's again, it all depends on who you run into.
Yeah, definitely. You were saying that gentleman was like a Spanish descent, right?
Yes, he was definitely of Spanish, definitely of Spanish descent. I think it was either Brazilian or Portuguese.
For sure, for sure. Yeah. Or yeah, so that's Portuguese. Well, Hispanic or
Yeah,
Latino.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Correct, correct, correct. And
Yeah, for
all of
sure.
that.
Yeah, definitely. Because your presentation, I mean, listening to you, you speak the King's English, very eloquent for sure. And that's definitely a great skill set. A lot of people, I encourage people to kind of embrace, because I teach English to students around the world, and I'm proud of myself, for how I can communicate. And I encourage people, it really helps them out get their point across. And that's something that's kind of in America, obviously, I mean, not to make general assumptions, but obviously you can look at the culture, you look at hip hop and like Lotto, big, Mulatta, the woman, the rapper, listen to how she talks, and a lot of these other
Mm.
rappers, that's promoted as being cool speech to talk like that, which is very, very unfortunate. But yeah,
But I guess that's, when you make it, that's what pays.
yeah, it pays.
But
Yeah.
if you don't make it into that market, then you're going to have to adapt to something else really, really, really fast, because you may not get along. Remember now, a lot of you can't talk like that in real business. You cannot express, and you would definitely have to code switch. I would say about 95% of the people in business, or professional businesses, have to code switch.
Yeah, yeah, like even, the rapper Jay-Z, right? I mean, I know he raps and he does the hip hop stuff, but he's behind closed doors and he has all that money. Obviously, we know Kanye can definitely code switch and speak proper English, which I think he's always shown that he can. Um, but
He tries to, but he also to makes a fool of himself for a couple of things that he says, because he's trying to code switch so bad to try to appease a certain group of people,
mhm. Yeah,
with a certain people that to accept him as being intelligent, etc. He fumbles a lot. He
yeah, yeah.
fumbles a lot.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. I mean, I've never really been a fan of his music or anything, but even his political commentary as of late, I mean, for the past several years, has been so kind of out of the park. But that's a whole nother discussion. But yeah, man, there's so much things I mean, it's getting late. I know it's late for you, late for me. There's so many things that we could talk about. This has been a very intriguing conversation. So I greatly appreciate you hopping on here and having this dialogue with me, and help educate the public. So we have people here in the chat, and of course, people are going to watch the playback, so they can, of course, digest this information and do more research, which I encourage people to do. And yeah, this is a great thing. So thank you.
Yep, you're welcome, and thank you for the invite. And yeah, this is how it begins. We have to start with something, with something positive, to move people, to give people the confidence for them, to not feel intimidated or feel that they have to change who they are in order to appease other people. Because you have to remember this, and this is for the audience: nobody pays your bills other than you.
Hmm.
Nobody, you don't live for other people. If you live for other people, you're going to live a miserable life. Nobody pays your bill. When you go out and you work, when you get older and you have to support your family, you're going to find out really, really quick. The only people that are going to support you, or that got your back, is your own family, or is you and your wife or your partner or whoever it is that's there. A community is not going to be there for you to look out for you if that's what you're looking for. It's not going to be there. But just remember that, don't live for other people, live for yourself.